Today, we're going to do a little something different than what we normally do. We're not going to be talking about a movie or a TV show. We're just going to be talking about a specific director. And today, to get this started off, we're just going to talk about probably one of our favorites, Christopher Nolan. I just got to say that looking through directors, he was kind of the one that we've seen definitely most, if not all of his entire, filmography. Easy to talk about. So, Ben, Nolan.
Yeah, this guy has just built an absolutely incredible filmography and has not really taken that long to do it. He burst onto the scene with Memento, which then gives him basically his first studio picture is Insomnia. Mm-hmm. And I saw Insomnia in theaters, and I think that's the first Nolan movie that I ever saw, now that I think about it. Because I didn't see Memento until later. I don't remember what year I saw Memento. I think we had purchased it on DVD. So it's weird to say that my first Nolan film's Insomnia. But it's not really overwhelmingly a Christopher Nolan picture. You can tell that he's kind of reined in on that this is his first studio gig. And so he's kind of having to placate some...
Kowtow.
Yeah. So the first movie, I feel like his first studio picture that he really gets full reign to do what he's going to do is Batman Begins. Mm-hmm. And that's where most people start to realize, wow, this guy's something else. I'd like to hear your kind of initial thoughts on him as a storyteller.
So Memento was the first movie I saw of his, but not the first one in the theaters. And I will say, I love Memento. I think it's fantastic. I think it's really great. I like Insomnia. I wasn't as huge of a fan, but I definitely agree with you that it's not really his completely. Like, it doesn't have I don't want to say typical Nolan stuff, because obviously he doesn't do a lot of typical things throughout his movies, but definitely doesn't have that kind of Nolan feeling. However, Batman Begins, I loved, absolutely adored, thought it was great. Like, a little bit weaker, final chapter, final third. Loved the first two of him becoming Batman, of him kind of going through the training, of him first learning, Gotham stuff and getting his suit and all that. Like, that was absolutely brilliant. And kind of the down to earth feeling that he gave Batman at the time was so revolutionary, was so different than what had come before. I mean, we had just come off of Joel Schumacher's, Batman and Robin and Batman Forever, and just really kind of ruined it. And obviously Tim Burton's Batmans are Burton doing, his own thing. So this is kind of this realistic Batman, which is really, I felt was kind of great. But then, I mean, honestly, the stuff that in between of the Batman movies is still fantastic. I mean, he does The Prestige right after Batman Begins.
So I want to,
a year.
I want to stop you there if I can interject, because I think when I look at his filmography, in my opinion, The Prestige to me is kind of this pendulum turning point that for me with his earlier filmography, where I really start to see the genius of Nolan. Mm-hmm. I loved Batman Begins, but it's pretty conventional structurally. It doesn't start doing. You look at the ending of Batman Begins. It's not what has become known as the kind of typical conventional Nolan intercut ending. Like, it doesn't end that way. But The Prestige does. That's his first movie where he starts to do that intercut. And then with a character musical that's narrating, that's in the movie, that's off screen, and then the footage intercut over it, and the big reveal. I wrestle, because I think I like Dark Knight the best of his films, but in my brain, I almost think Prestige might be his best work still.
Okay.
Because it's so much more micro, and because the characters really seem to carry Prestige more than a lot of his other pictures. A lot of his other movies, the characters are really pretty much secondary to what he's doing. The Dark Knight, I think, doesn't do that either, though. It's Heath Ledger kind of took care of that. Like it's the Joker's movie. But yeah, I wanted to interject real quick with that. I think The Prestige is a really important film. And he effectively was able to make The Prestige because Batman Begins did so well. Like he had an agreement with Warner Brothers then that as long as things went well, then they would basically fund, because he made The Prestige for way less. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it wasn't $100 million picture. But
talking about that, they gave him not much for Prestige, but now he's become one of the few directors that they'll throw hundreds of millions of dollars to make a film. And he did it with Tenet, like a concept that is hard to understand. That's not a franchise movie. And I'm sorry, I thought John David Washington was fantastic in Tenet, but he's not the big name actor, like a tentpole actor that you put a couple $100 million movie on, but yet Nolan is able to pull it off because he's got this, that it factor when he makes movies that he brings people in to watch, that they're bigger than what they're supposed to be. I don't know how to really do it, but he just delivers.
I don't have insider information. This is largely what I've read, and it's verified. But he is one of a handful of big picture directors, along with a gentleman you might know named Ridley Scott, who will consistently stay on or under budget and finish on time with everything he does. And both of those guys are meticulous planners, and Nolan just finds ways to, this is a guy that if the weather's not cooperating, he'll just shoot anyway. And he's had other directors ask him, how do you get such crazy, cool looking like skies? And he's just like, we just shoot. Like, I don't wait. Nothing phases this guy, basically. He won't wait around for like a perfect sunny day necessarily to shoot a sequence. He'll just shoot it. Just like, we'll make it work. The famous example is the huge set they built for Inception on the mountainside in the snow. And they built a massive, not quite full scale, but it was big enough for actors to work in. And they went to blow it up and it failed spectacularly. Like they had it all wired up with dynamite and gasoline, and they go to blow this thing and only the initial explosion hits and the rest of it doesn't go up. And everybody's waiting for him to freak out. And he's just like, I was going to build a model of it anyway. The initial explosion's there. We'll just cut to the model. It's fine.
Yeah.
Nothing phases him. And so I think the studios recognize that, and they just have now decades of trust built up that this guy's just going to deliver. And so much of Tenet's issues were just outside of his control as far as box office. If you look at like the theaters it was in during COVID, it knocked it out of the park. Like for it to have made the money it did in the middle of the pandemic is a success by any stretch of the imagination.
Kind of, talk about, I read an article about Interstellar that was talking to Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway about kind of working with Nolan. And I don't know why I had in this mind, but I definitely felt he was much more of like the auteur director, like everything had to be right and everything, but he's not. They're talking about like, you mess up on a take. Like sometimes he doesn't even reshoot. He's just like, oh, I like it. We'll reuse it, or we'll use what I can from it and we'll work around it. And I think some of those, not having the best takes, but having then to work around it organically or try to fix it in editing or whatever, comes up with some beautiful things, like kind of what you're talking about with the sky and those kind of things that you wouldn't get if you were like, nope, it has to be exactly this, has to be exactly that. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And that's something that people should learn. I'm sure it's hard to teach or hard to get that eye of how to figure it out. And he just seems to have it.
Yeah. So. This is a director concerned with performance, but not obsessed with performance. He is more of a director that leans toward camera and what is the camera grabbing. But I love that. I love his whole approach. He basically works the way I would love to work on set, except for I freak out about stuff. So like I'm too neurotic to operate that way. Yeah. But yeah, he's able to roll with punches of stuff just not quite going right. But by the same token, he has a very tight knit crew he rolls with. He's had basically the same production designer the entire time, like production and costume design. He had the same cinematographer for a long time. I think up through Rises, he had Wally Pfister, who won an Academy Award. And then Wally wanted to direct. And so he was like, he rolled with the punches and hired this Hoyt that he's had since Interstellar. And then, like we mentioned on another episode, his relationship's kind of soured right now with old Hans Zimmer. Because Hans did Dune.
I don't know.
But that's not a bad thing, right? Because it gives other people an opportunity to work with him. Oh, and his first assistant director is the same guy like the whole time. Since at least Begins or Insomnia or something like that. And just an aside, first assistant director for people that aren't in the industry is kind of a confusing term, because you're like, well, wait, so they're like a junior director and then they become like a film director? No. They're basically the closest thing to a film producer on set. And they keep the ship running. They keep the main point of a first assistant director is to keep the shot schedule on the clock. Like they're in your ear. Hey, we've got 5 minutes to set, or 20 minutes to set the next shot up, and then we got to roll. And then you start going over on takes. If you're a director, you're at take 20, and that first AD gently is like in your ear. You need to wrap this up because we've got 6 more shots. So that's what a first AD does. That's why you don't see them. It's not really a creative position. So they don't usually become a director. They'll usually, if they get tired of being on set, they'll go into producing or something like that. But it's a super, super important position. I mean, by the way, the 2 most important positions on set might just be first assistant director and the script supervisor. And I'm sure he's had the same script supervisor his entire career. And script supers will become first ADs as well. But just a little note for people that aren't necessarily in the industry. So he's got this core around him of people he trusts. And so I gobbled up as much as I could on what it was like to be on a Nolan set. And it's very calm. He's got his flask of tea that he likes to drink. And he's got a little wireless monitor so he can see, even though they shoot film, it's got a transmitter. So he's able to kind of keep the image. But yeah, the guy's super chill. And it just blows my mind that he's able to be that chill and kind of loosey-goosey with some stuff and make just what I think are some of the best films of our era.
He also likes to play with time. That's one of the things I love. I love the fact that pretty much almost all his movies, except for like the Batman stuff, really just play with time in some form or fashion. I mean, obviously The Prestige, less so. Obviously Insomnia, kind of. But I mean, Memento, obviously Inception and Interstellar, Tenet, even Dunkirk. I mean, It's fun to see kind of what he's going to do next with time, to play with it. And, I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with Oppenheimer and what he's going to do with that. Like, I just can't wait to see.
Yeah, there's absolutely going to be a time component to it. And I don't think it's going to be presented in, it's certainly not going to be presented in a linear fashion or strictly linear fashion. I think sections of it will be linear, and then we'll jump around. But it's a strength of his, but it's sometimes a weakness, because I know there, some audiences really do have trouble kind of following what's going on because he doesn't spoon feed the viewer, which I love. I don't like being spoon fed narrative necessarily. I mean, now we can get into some of the well-known audio issues with Nolan movies. And it all came to a head with Tenet. And I guess I can give I'll be brief backstory on this. If you've not seen Tenet, there are entire sections of this movie there where the dialogue is basically unintelligible. And initially people thought that it was just like a bad audio mix. But the reality is I think it was a creative choice. And he's come out and basically said as much, that he was experimenting with, this is a guy experimenting with like a $200 million movie, experimenting with using dialogue as just basically a sound effect, like part of the sound rather than the most important sound. And it drove people nuts. Now, when I saw it in theaters, I picked up on it pretty quickly that this was intentional. And so I just stopped trying to understand it and just kind of sat back and tried to understand what was happening visually. And that worked for me, because later in the movie, characters are speaking and they're perfectly easy to understand. So I was like, well, this isn't a person mixing this that messed up. This is a creative choice. So my guess is he doesn't do this on Oppenheimer. I don't think he will. I think that there was a lot of backlash.
Well, and Nolan's definitely not one to not watch it after it's being done edited or sound edited, and doesn't notice that he can't hear the dialogue and then is just okay with it. Like, obviously this was a conscious decision on his part to send it out.
Or like he's going deaf.
So obviously he does.
Or he's just losing his hearing.
Puts the subtitles on.
That was the joke, right? That he was losing his hearing, and that's what, no. But what's funny is that he went from Dunkirk, which is largely, entire sections are basically a silent picture, to Tenet, where there's dialogue, but you can't understand it. So I don't know what we're getting with Oppenheimer. Greatness.
I don't know. I mean, honestly, looking at his track record, yes. So I'm still curious. I know he talked about, like, with The Dark Knight Rises, I'm still curious what things would have been like if Heath had still been around. Like, would the Joker have played a part at all in Rises? And what did that story look like? Or what did that movie look like?
The only tidbit I've ever found on that was, yes, Joker was the featured villain in the third installment of his Batman trilogy, and that Joker was behind bars, but was somehow still exceedingly dangerous, which makes sense. And there was supposed to be some sort of big trial. And I've read that you sort of get a glimpse of what that trial kind of was still in Dark Knight Rises, when you have Scarecrow character presiding with all those desks and stuff stacked up. So, but that's the extent of anything I've ever read. So who really knows what it was? They seemed, and surprisingly, when he made Batman Begins, there was no intention of making a sequel. It was designed as a standalone picture. I mean, they did that fun little nod at the end to Joker with the playing card, and he's like, "Oh, I'll look into it." Yeah. But there was no deal done for a follow up, and so they just took it one movie at a time. And so Dark Knight was the same deal. They took it one movie at a time, and then obviously he had loose plans in place for a third installment, but then Heath passes unexpectedly. So, and Rises, I just don't think Rises could have ever met the expectations created by Dark Knight, because Dark Knight's in my top 10. It's firmly been in my top 10 favorite films. I do want to caveat that I always say my top 10 favorite movies. Like, you'll never see Ben's 10 best movies, because it's just too subjective. So it's my favorites, but Dark Knight is in my top 10, but I have a hard time not wanting to put The Prestige in there too. So
I can definitely tell you it's probably my favorite, or in like the top 2 or 3 favorite movie going experiences. I mean, because you and I saw it, in true IMAX, and just from going from the small screen to the IMAX screen, for all those different scenes in Dark Knight, it was just absolutely amazing.
You and I,
that opening bank.
Yeah, you and I and Vlad shared that experience at AMC City Walk in Studio City, and to date, that's the most awe-inspiring image I've ever seen in my life. When it cut to, you get that first initial shot where it cuts to Ledger's. It's Ledger's Joker, and he's holding the clown mask down by his side.
That's right.
And that was in a full frame IMAX cut, and the screen goes full frame, and it was full 70 millimeter film. And I've never seen anything like it before or since. I think we were still living there when The Dark Knight Rises prologue was released, 10-minute teaser basically, and that was 70 millimeter as well. And I was like, wow. But then I saw Rises in the IMAX later because I'd moved away. We both had, and saw it in IMAX, and the image just wasn't as crisp. He's something else with his IMAX obsession, but I get it. The problem is there's only like 20 or 30 of these screens that are gonna, I think 30 screens worldwide are gonna play Oppenheimer in 70 millimeter IMAX format. Yeah. So it's just not something that a lot of people are going to be able to enjoy.
When you get you get those fake ones or whatever. Luckily, we do have one that's about 30 miles away at the National Air and Space Museum, the one in Virginia, not the DC one, but they have a true IMAX theater with the IMAX, the projectors and stuff. Like that's where we saw Rises, which was really nice.
Yeah, I mean the one here it's owned by the Regal now. It's a true IMAX screen. In fact, it's one of the largest screens in North America. The problem is they're still doing the dual 2K in their IMAX approved Christie projectors. Yeah, I kind of love his obsession with recording these things in the best format on earth, even though it's just completely ridiculous. I mean, the cameras weigh 80 pounds. Like you can't really record dialogue heavy scenes with them because the cameras are too loud. Although IMAX is working on that. And then they came up with their own film stock for Oppenheimer. Because prior to this movie, black and white 70 millimeter or 65 millimeter negative didn't exist.
Pushing the envelope.
Oh, absolutely pushing the envelope. Yeah, and James Cameron's pushing the digital envelope, and on the other side, Nolan's pushing still pushing the old analog envelope. So, but
he makes lots of money doing it.
Yeah.
And they're going to continue to give him lots of money to do these things.
He's tremendous. Now, I do want to address a big kind of a common complaint I've heard from people on Nolan, which is that his films lack emotion. I don't really think that's fair. I think what you're seeing, though, and I'll just use Tenet as the most recent example since that's his last release. Yeah, long stretches of Tenet are kind of emotionally can be flat. But almost always Nolan gives you an incredibly powerful emotional payoff. He did it he does it more subtly, but he does it at the end of Tenet. The ending of Dunkirk and Dark Knight are my favorite Nolan endings. Oh. I mean, they just Dunkirk is just really emotionally powerful ending to a movie. Interstellar's not quite as, but Interstellar's got much more emotionally resonant moments peppered throughout. And that's why you cast McConaughey, because he's able to, he's very raw. Yeah. So I don't really think that's fair. And then Inception's about a guy trying to get back to his children, for crying out loud.
Yep.
I mean, I don't quite understand the argument, but I guess it does. The only thing I could see is that there are sometimes long stretches in his movies that are, where the emotional tone is kind of a little bit flat.
But the payoffs he gives you in the films are just absolutely fantastic. Yeah. Like how he does this, how he twists it, how he brings it around, puts it all back together is just great. I mean, I remember with Memento where it was kind of like, wait, I'm watching one scene and, one part of the movie forward and the rest of the movie in little snippets backwards, and then it kind of coalesces, like fantastic.
Yeah. And by the way, I mean, he's been kind of labeled as a aloof and kind of an emotionally distant director. And I disagree. I mean, I look at the number of movies he has in his catalog that in some way or another address what it is to be a parent, specifically a father. Interstellar, check. Inception, check. The Prestige, check. And then moments, the whole father-son dynamic that he's created with his Batman trilogy. So yeah, it's more subtly done, and he usually waits for a larger payoff because he ends movies so well.
He does. I can't wait for Oppenheimer to come out. Oh,
yeah,
man,
we're basically going to treat
good.
this as like I guess we can, kind of an Oppenheimer preview episode. I mean, is it fair to say that's your number one most anticipated movie of 2023?
Absolutely.
Yeah, mine too.
100%. Yeah. This is it. The rest of everything else is just gravy to see once Oppenheimer's out. Like much like even 2020 with Tenet, like I was excited it was still coming out because I really wanted to see it, and I really do like it. Like I walked out of it really still happy with Tenet, even though the two guys I saw it with were complaining about not being able to hear it and it was super loud and all that stuff. I mean, they liked it, but I just walked out going, "What did I just watch?" Like so many levels.
My only complaint with Tenet is not enough people in my circles have seen it. So there isn't a wide group of people I can even discuss it with. I mean, obviously you, and I've got, I think a few coworkers that saw it, but not that many. And then a lot of people that have seen it only saw it once and they didn't understand it. It's not irony that movie that's spelled the same way forwards and backwards probably needs 2 viewings to be fully understood. It really does. And it's just wild. It's wild. I love his risk taking as a director. The guy just doesn't play it safe. And you think he would by this point, and he's just like, no, not interested. I want to push the technology. I want to push what it is you think a narrative, film narrative should look like. I'm going to try to push what you think a good sound mix is. He doesn't digitally color correct anything.
Wow.
No.
That I didn't know.
He has a whole process that he basically created with cinematographer Wally Pfister on film processing the negative traditionally. And then they color match what few CGI sequences and compositing, they'll color match it to the way that film stock looks. Which if you watch his movies in the highest format possible, there is a crispness to his image that other movies that are even shot on film don't have. Go back and watch Nolan movies. By and large, they all mostly have kind of a similar look. Like skin tones usually look pretty uniform across all his entire film catalog. Like he doesn't deviate really hard. Dunkirk's probably one of the only ones that kind of seems to have a different feel, but like the skin tones in Tenet look like the skin tones in Interstellar.
Okay,
and they look like the skin tones in Inception. Like he has a uniformity to the way things kind of look. And I love that because I don't like the over stylized, color corrected, super heavy color grade in anything other than maybe like a John Wick movie. Like I appreciate it for things like that.
Yeah.
But the other director that does this, that tries to create more of a naturalistic film, this is the way the film kind of is going to look, is Tarantino. And his movies have healthy color, good color saturation, good vibrance. Yeah. And Nolan's not afraid of good color saturation. His movies aren't washed out. Like say a Clint Eastwood movie. Go watch a Clint Eastwood movie. They might as well be black and white. Alex heard me complain about this before. I love Clint Eastwood, but Nolan's image is as good as there is. As good as there is.
Yeah.
And a lot of my favorite directors seem to not shy away from that. He's special. He's special.
He's very special.
I don't know when he's going to win a stinking Oscar, even though I don't like the Oscars. I still think he needs to win one. It seems like there's members of the Academy that don't like him. I don't know what it is.
Because he doesn't play by the rules.
I'd love to see him win Best Director for Oppenheimer. Here's the thing I think Oppenheimer is going to offer that a lot of his other movies haven't. It's a it's a character study. I mean, the visuals are going to be extraordinary, right? With him, especially the fact that he recreated an A-bomb explosion with conventional explosives and filmed it with high-speed cameras instead of CGI. Which, of course, of course Nolan did that. Of course he did. But the fact that you have Cillian Murphy that's going to be able to play this character,
I hope he wins.
And he wrote the script in first person. So the entire movie's from the perspective of Oppenheimer.
Interesting.
So
okay.
and he wrote it. He decided to write it in first person to stay in that lane, basically. So if that's the case, then I think you get, a movie that would be one of his first heavy character study movies since The Prestige. So, because the rest of his movies aren't. The Dark Knight might fit that bill, but a lot of his other movies seem to be more about the environment and what's happening to the characters rather than focusing on one individual. So yeah, I hope he wins Best Director, and then obviously I hope Cillian Murphy wins Best Actor.
Actor.
Yeah. I don't know if I told you I don't know if it'll win Best Picture. I don't know. It's going to be.
No, well, I mean, he's only been nominated twice for Best Picture for Dunkirk and then Inception.
Yeah.
So, and only once for Best Directing for Dunkirk.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Yeah, he got absolutely. Dark Knight got hosed.
I mean,
completely.
Because it's a superhero movie.
I think it's the best. Amongst the best movies ever made, and it's firmly, to me, it is Mount Everest of the superhero genre.
Yeah,
there's no close second. I don't want to hear the fanboys telling me Logan is. I like Logan, but
not even. It's very
it
enjoyable.
Is. That's the other one
caliber.
that gets some pub on. This is the best superhero movie ever made. Is Logan? I'm like, nah, I don't think so. No. But again, it's subjective. But I'm just figured I'd.
But they're wrong.
Of course.
Yeah, come on.
Of course they are.
On our podcast, they're wrong.
Yeah.
And in real life.
Well, I guess we didn't really dig into like his signature stuff, but maybe a little bit. He definitely.
Yeah.
He's got the intercut where
plays with time.
Yeah, he'll take multiple timelines and weave them eloquently into a wonderful conclusion. You've heard Tarantino say this. He's cutting his career short as far as feature films he's going to direct because he's studied so many big directors and feels like there's a point at which they're never able to quite match the hot point in their career. And I just wonder
when he feels like that's going to happen.
Well, is Oppenheimer kind of his last truly great picture, or does this guy still got a lot of tricks up his sleeve? I mean, I think he's going to continue to make tremendous movies, but I'm wondering if all the cards or all the dominoes are falling right for Oppenheimer to be his Saving Private Ryan or his Gladiator or Heat.
Something crazy.
Is this his Heat? Yeah. Seems like these guys, and then obviously Spielberg had Schindler's List as well. So, and many other great films. It's not like those are the only two, but my favorite of Spielberg is Saving Private Ryan, but he's made a bunch of other stuff. And yeah, Nolan just feels like, I don't know, sometimes I feel like they took Ridley Scott and Michael Mann and Steven Spielberg and sampled their DNA and mixed it in a lab in England and gave birth to Christopher Nolan. So, but tonally, I think Nolan is closest to Michael Mann.
Yeah,
that's who when I watch his films in their tone, that's who I feel like I see the most.
Well,
so,
and honestly, out of all the directors he's kind of homage to, I think Man has been the one that he's homaged the most.
Yeah, Ridley Scott would be number 2.
Yeah.
Blade Runner still has a huge, heavy influence on everything that Nolan does, but and Kubrick. Thank goodness his shooting method is not Kubrick.
Yeah.
Endless takes to wear down my actors and actresses until they just break, and then I get what I want. So
he wouldn't have the actors coming back for more every single movie.
Kubrick couldn't operate as a director in this era. Nobody would work with him.
Not at all. No.
Yeah, Nolan was made for this era, and we're just all happy to be part of the party.
Yes, we are. Any final thoughts?
No,
No, I think we got it all out.
Well, I mean, we could probably dialogue on him for a long time, but that's not really the point of this. Our goal is that you get yourself out there and watch some Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, go back, see his back catalog. Even his movie Following, one of his first, is still really good too, and a lot very interesting.
Yeah, he says Following is basically the best that they could do kind of on their own with minimal crew, minimal investment. That was just sort of the pinnacle of what he felt like could be accomplished.
Yeah.
Outside the
and it's still good
system. Oh yeah.
Still good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us very much. This has been Cinema A to B podcast. If you're watching this on the YouTube channel, please, if you haven't done it already, hit that subscribe button. As well as always like to say, also hit the bell if you want to be notified when we come out with a new episode. YouTube has decided that subscribe means nothing.
Pretty much.
To you. Pretty much. And so the bell is really everything. So we do put these out every Monday. So if you don't want to hit the bell, just come back to our channel on Monday and see the new episode. So thanks for joining us, and see you in the next one.
Yeah, take care, everybody.